what he wanted to say to introduce Dr. Zelinsky, and he said, using wonderful light as powerful, healing, loving nutrition for the plastic brain, Dr. Zelinsky has transformed my life. Each life-giving day washes water-like over me as life-changing sound reception gives new perspectives and distinctions. Please hear the science of her transformational work. The world is richer than each of us realize. In uselessly stultifying tunnels, we autistics have limited distinction. So does everyone else, I suggest. Thank you for your warm reception on this cold day to someone who changes possibilities for all of us. Thanks for being here.
Thank you. I like what you wrote, light-changing sound perception. I like that combination of words. And that's what I do. I called this lecture Neuroplasticity in Action because a lot of this started from the book, The Ghost in My Brain. I don't know how many of you have seen this book. Some of you. And it's about the science of brain plasticity and how it changed a man's life. But Donnelly Marcus, who also changes people's lives, and she's the other practitioner written in this book, she found this quote by Oliver Wendell Holmes, and I thought it fit. It says, man's mind, stretched to a new idea, never goes back to its original dimension. So once you learn some new concepts today, it's going to be almost impossible to go back to where you were when you walked in the door. I want to thank the Smith family, for putting this together, and John in particular for the kind words you continually write. Your brain is incredible, so if there's anything I can do to help get all of that information in you out, that'd be great. Seems like we're helping each other. Mary Van Hoy, again, for loaning us her office and for using her license. And Aurora Chamberlain was in charge of coordinating the two offices. This Ghost in My Brain is about a man who had a car accident, speaking here, and he spent 8 years going to different doctors saying, I have all these symptoms, and they kept checking him out and saying, well, you're fine, deal with it, this is the best we can get you. And what they kept doing was giving him things for his mind and for his body, different medicines, different exercises, but they forgot about the environment. And his environment was messed up. And he eventually, after 8 years, came to the mind-eye connection, and we said, let's check the environment, and found that his eyes and ears were not matched together. So we put a pair of glasses on that synchronized them, and his whole world changed. And he wrote a book about it, and Viking Publishers put this book out. And it's been all over the world. He says that all of the TV interviews and the radio interviews and the speeches, he's reached about 14 million people telling them about this all over the world. So he gives a voice to people worldwide. When you walk out of here today, I want you to have 4 main things that you learn. 1, that the eye is connected to a lot of stuff. 2, that even when the eyes are closed, you're still having electrical activity in your brain and chemical activity in your brain. 3, that your eyes dominate over all the other sensory systems. And I just looked and found that the one piece that I was looking for might be in my hotel room. Mary has it. You have like Brunel Prism goggles? Mm-hmm. Yeah. But I thought I had them here, but I didn't. So the eyes are dominant over the other senses. And 4, neuro-optometry is beneficial as part of a team of practitioners. So all of you with nonverbal children, you have spent years and years and years going to different types of doctors. But neuro-optometry is a key part because what we deal with is the environment. And what we're doing is combining the science and an art. There's an art form. And we're working with the critical connection between the eyes and ears. So when you take your children to the eye doctor and they say you can see, And then you take them to the ear doctor and they say they can hear. Then the people say automatically, oh, wow, prism.
Oh, wow.
Thank you.
Uh-huh.
What people say you can, just because your eyes work and your ears work does not mean that you can watch and listen at the same time. And how your senses integrate affects where your attention is. So I use an example of jugglers because I'm a juggler. And if I put all of you in a room full of jugglers and everybody's juggling and doing things and you're throwing balls up in the air and they fall, you're going to say, I can't do it. And if you go to the doctor and they say, well, let's check you out structurally. You got a hand, you have another hand, you have lungs, you have eyes, everything's working. You should be able to juggle. Why not? Everybody else in the room only has 2 arms and 2 eyes. They're juggling. So just because you pick the structures separately does not mean that you've learned the function of using them together. And eye-ear connection is learned, just like eye-hand connection is. So if you have a 2-year-old who can't tie their shoe, you say, because you're 2, you're fumbling. And if you can't catch a ball, you're 2, because you're just learning hand-eye coordination. If you have a 10-year-old who can't tie their shoe, they're labeled. And they're told you're supposed to be able to catch a ball because you're 10. It's a learned skill, and you expect to learn it step by step by step. At 5, you're not as good as 8. At 8, you're not as good as 10, and it's learned. So eye-ear connection is also learned. It's a learned skill. And if you give a 3-year-old an iPad that has sounds and sights on it, but their eyes and ears are not yet connected really well, then they're going to have problems. But since the iPads have such fun games, then they're going to sit, the brain is going to say, well, I can't make my eyes and ears work together. Which one should I pick? And some are going to pick ears and some are going to pick eyes. So a lot of these nonverbal people, it's likely that they just picked their eyes rather than their ears and said, I can't deal with the combination, we'll just ignore one. But if they ignore the auditory inputs, then how are they supposed to get feedback on what sounds right and what doesn't sound right? Like the word white and right, they just about sound the same. But if you don't hear nuances, you won't get it. I went to Australia and I was trying to hear the difference between the word late and the word light. Because in Australia, to me, they sound the same. Light and light. And I kept hearing, and I had the person repeat it, late and light. I said, say it slower. And they kept saying light and light. And it sounded exactly the same to me. And the other Australians at the table said, it's not the same. Can't you hear the difference? And I was like, no, I can't. It sounds exactly the same to me. So the nonverbal people, if a lot of words sound very similar to them, they're not going to be able to differentiate. They're not going to be able to know when they say something right. And they're not going to use that skill because if every time I opened my mouth and said a syllable, it didn't sound right and nobody else understood what I was saying, I would just give up and do other things and learn gesturing because then everybody would understand me. And children do that at a very young age. So I don't have any disclosures to give. Typically, when you do scientific speeches, they make you put a slide up that says disclosures. So in case you work for a contact lens company and they're paying you a lot of money to come, you need to say that if you then talk about those contact lenses. But I don't have any disclosures. I have a patent on a test that links eyes and ears. And I'm currently certifying doctors around the world so that people like you can go to a doctor in your area rather than trying to come far away. But I hope that today, that the purpose of today is to give you information that you might not have known and make you understand why neuro-optometry is such a key part of things. So I don't know how much all of you know about the eyes. I know Mary knows a lot about the eyes, but I don't know about the rest of you. So this is what the inside of an eye looks like. The black spot, the pupil, is just a hole. So if you shine a light through the hole, this is what you get. the white thing there that looks like the moon, that's a nerve. And then this little spot over here, this is the 20/20 part of your eye. So when the goal of a regular eye exam is to push the light to shine right there, because if all the light bends here, you'll see clearly. And that's the whole basis of the which is better, 1 or 2. Put the light right there, person sees very clearly. But there's 126 million receptors in each eye that are responding to the light. And what they do is they filter down so that coming out of the eye is only 1.2 million filter signals. So you get 126 million things that are activated, but only 1.2 million signals coming out at the end. So an awful lot happens at the retinal level. It has activity 24/7, even when you're sleeping. And even in blind people, their sleep patterns are affected, and thyroid function is affected. So the eyesight part of your eye, that 20/20 part, even when it's gone, lots of other stuff happens. And here's all your peripheral eyesight. And even when that's gone, lots of other stuff happens. So what we'll talk about later is 3 separate parts. The seeing part, the 20/20, they call it the what is it part. The peripheral part, which tells you where things are for navigation. And then there's another part of the eye that is just used for background information. So, now, when you go to the doctor, they break things into systems. They ask you, every time you walk in a doctor's office, they ask you about systems. And they say, neurological systems, breathing systems, circulatory, all the systems. And for the eyes, here's the standard of what they ask. They ask about double vision, blurry vision, itching eyes, those are more structurally related, because each of these means a piece of your eye is damaged. But they don't ask things like, do words float when you're reading? They don't ask, can you maintain looking at a computer screen for a very long time? They don't ask, what head position do you prefer when you're reading? Those are functional questions. So the standard doctor's tests are more structural based, not functional based. So when you go to a doctor, they're looking at you like a mechanic would look at a car. And they're saying, is the steering wheel good? Is the brake fluid filled? Is the gas filled? Does the electrical system work? Is everything there? But they're not looking at how everything works together. They're not working at how you can drive. Just because you have a perfect car that's given a clean bill of health does not mean you can put a 5-year-old driver into it and expect the car to run down the highway real well. Because the 5-year-old driver has to make decisions in timing and space. And that's what humans do when they walk around. If you think of yourself as being inside of a car, you're navigating every time you walk around. And you have to make judgments in time and in space when you walk around. So there's issues with the testing that's currently available because it's not testing what's necessary. Most eye tests don't require a person to walk. They just require a person to sit in a chair. And then they say, here's your best glasses, or they say, you don't need any glasses, but then now go run around a playground and go move and go drive. That's not the same thing as sitting in a chair, taking as much time as you want to look at a target and think about it and answer on a conscious level. That's the letter A. No, it's a little blurry. Which is better, 1 or 2? Oh, now it's clearer. That's all at a conscious level. And it's all zooming your attention on a little target that's not moving, and it's a high contrast target. So how's that going to help you walk around a dark alley at night? It's not testing for that. So the regular eye exams are not sufficient anymore. They used to be, but they're no longer sufficient. So we have this campaign called Leave 20/20 in the 20th Century, because the 20/20 was developed in the 1800s, in the middle of the 1800s. And when it was developed, it was the greatest thing ever because it standardized eye exams. So it was needed. And people said, you know, I'm going to Dr. A, and he says I see great, and now I went to Dr. B, and he says I don't see great. What happened? Well, they needed a standardization. So when it was developed, it was great, because now you could go to any doctor, and they all had the same chart, and if one doctor said 20/30, the next doctor had to measure the same thing, say 20/30. And if you changed, they know some disease was starting. But that was designed before iPads, before video games, before traffic, because it was before cars were invented. It was when people walked around learning to use their peripheral vision all the time, as opposed to now when you sit in classrooms the same way. So it's not sufficient. There has to be another test that tests the peripheral eyesight as it combines with the central eyesight. So one thing to get across is that point number one, the eye is connected to a lot of stuff. There's a lot of chemical stuff that it's connected to. This is a picture of all the different things. Here's an eyeball, and it's connected to a lot of chemical circuitry. But there's also neurological circuitry, peripheral eyesight, central eyesight. And the central eyesight, that 20/20, it's the slowest pathway. So why are people using the very slowest thing in order to judge how good somebody is? If the central eyesight's poor or the peripheral eyesight's poor, maybe it's because one of these fast pathways is poor. So those are chemical things. And then there's a whole bunch of neurological things. This is the retina. And the retina has all kinds of neurological connections. You don't have to know any of those. Mary knows these, I know these, but there's just lots and lots of stuff, and that's the main point. If you take the eyeball up there, and you take a little piece of it and blow it up, there's cones and rods. And then in the back here is blood vessels to nourish it. And if you take one little piece of this, a tip of the rod and a little bit of the blood vessel, and you blow that up, look at all the stuff that's happening, and that's just one rod. Here's the blood, so if you eat sugar or something, if you eat whatever's in your bloodstream, it goes into the nourishment layer of the eye, and a lot of stuff happens. So it should be easy for you to get point number one. The eye is connected to a lot of stuff. Point number two, even with the eyes closed, there's activity going on. If you were all sleeping and I came into your bedrooms with a flashlight and I shined the flashlight on you, and when you were sound asleep, you would roll over to avoid the light. It's a neat thing that happens at a subconscious level. You don't know you're doing it, but your brain will say, the light goes through my eyelids, it bugs me, I'm going to roll over to avoid the light. So there's a subconscious protection mechanism left. Just the same as in your ears. That they say when mothers go to sleep at night, that if their kids start crying, it wakes them up. Even mothers who had been super sound sleepers their whole life, when they have a child, if the child makes a little bit of crying, they can hear it, it wakes them up. So there's a piece of your brain in survival mode that allows you to still be attuned to the environment. And that environment is the key factor of our few hours today when we're talking, because it's not tested for. Just the mind and the body are tested for. So the point number two, that even during sleep, the eye still functions. I was saying I could take a flashlight and turn it, you move. The neat thing about the eyelid is it's not made out of bone. It doesn't block all the light. It's just a protective mechanism so dust and dirt don't come in. But light still goes in. And when the light goes through the eyelid, it still hits that eye, the one we had earlier here. It still hits this. And the 20/20 part, the seeing part, the conscious level, that doesn't do anything when the eyes are closed. But all the rest of it does, because all the rest of it's connected to things like the thyroid, like the posture, like all different parts of the nervous system. It's lots of stuff is connected that have nothing to do with eyesight. So you can make somebody feel nauseous when you put the wrong glasses on them, or you can make them feel good when you put the right glasses on them. And it doesn't have anything to do with eyesight. So when we're talking about visual attention and where to point your eyes and how to deal with your environment, here's an example that was on the internet. If you point your eyes one way, this man looks like he's facing you straight ahead. If you point them a different way, they're confused, but they don't know where to place their eyes, place their attention. He can be pointing in a profile. So how many people see him in a profile where he's pointing that way? Most of you. And how many people can see him pointing straight ahead? A lot of you. And how many see it going back and forth and back and forth? So then most of you see it going back and forth. Now, what if this were your environment all the time? Then isn't it confusing if sometimes things look one way and sometimes they look another way? How much attention would you put on his picture, and how long would you maintain that attention? I mean, it doesn't make sense to keep looking at the environment when the environment's so confusing. So if you're going to be looking at a confusing environment, what's the way to survive? I know. Let's just forget about the environment and go into your own little world. And that's what a lot of people with autism do. They have their own little worlds because it's nice in there and they can control it, and the regular environment is just too confusing. So the neat thing about eyeglasses is they can change the environment, because the environment's totally changing all the time. Even when I look around here, some of you are scratching your head, some of you are moving around, so there's things moving in the environment. Somebody's picking up the water to drink. So there's all these changes, and I have to filter those out and adapt to them. Now, I wore a sweater and another sweater because I'm usually cold, because I have to deal with the environment. If the environment is too warm, I can take my sweater off. But if it's too cold, I have to suffer and deal with it. So you have to make adaptations, and you make them at different levels: unconscious levels, subconscious levels, and conscious levels. So in autism, the adaptations are made unconsciously, but sometimes at a conscious level, the people say it's just not worth it because I don't understand anyway, so why bother? There's that why bother level. And then even when you do bother, if you don't understand and people get frustrated with you, you just give up and you go back in your own little world. So the environment is really crucial to have it make sense. And when I measure autistic people, one of the things I look for is what chunk of space are they comfortable in. So, for instance, when I'm looking around now, there's a whole room full of people, and I see this giant room. That's done with my peripheral eyesight. But if I want to put my attention on one thing, like the cameraman, I zoom my attention, and that's a little tube of attention. But I'm still aware of the room. In autism, it doesn't work that way. They don't have a big awareness and a small attention. When they put attention on something, the awareness just shrinks, and they're not aware. Or they can be aware but cannot maintain attention. But the two, the attention pathway and the awareness pathway, do not go hand in hand the way that other people do, neurotypical people do. So it's interesting because every single autistic patient I've seen has a section of space over which they're comfortable. It could be something small on one side, like I have people who stim like this, and this is their space that they're comfortable in. So you can put glasses on to take the whole world and shove it into that space, and then they're comfortable. You have other people who they're only good on the right side, other people only the left side, other people far away, other people close up. And we have glasses that can make things look bigger, smaller, closer, farther. So it's important to realize that the eye connects to both, not only the attention and awareness on the outside, but it's got inside information for comfort. So if you think of your brain as being made out of Play-Doh, and you take a chunk of the Play-Doh and you pull it forward, that becomes your retina. That's the inside lining of your eye. So it is a piece of your brain. It's not connected to your brain. It is your brain. And it's sitting there in the back of your eye, a piece of your brain, and it's getting information from the outside, and it's getting other information from the blood vessels. Every time your heart pumps, and your blood vessels have medicine in them or anything, alcohol, sugar, that goes up into the back of your eye too to nourish it. So it's an interface between everything outside and everything inside. So there's a comfort level that has to be balanced with the eyesight. And if your body's not comfortable, your brain is going to hypersensitize the peripheral part of your eye or desensitize the peripheral part of your eye. So the peripheral part of your eyesight changes and adapts depending on how comfortable your body is. And that's the piece that people don't realize, and that's the piece that eye doctors don't tell you. Because when they're looking at what's the peripheral part of your eye doing? Does it work? And the answer is, yeah, it works. But what's it doing when you walk around? What's it doing when you're thinking? What's it doing, period? It turns off and on depending on how your body is. If you're anxious, and people have anxiety and they're scared, sometimes the peripheral section is hypersensitive and anything bothers it. And if they're depressed, sometimes the peripheral section turns off and they're just ignoring it. So I went walking with somebody. I was with Benoit, actually, and we're busy walking, and he goes, wait, look out. I'm looking to see that you're talking to me and you're not paying attention. And there was a curb, and he didn't want me to fall off the curb. And he's right, I didn't see the curb. Because normally when you walk, the peripheral part of your eye is turned on for safety. But in this case, I was so comfortable talking to him, and we were having this deep conversation, I just plain turned it off and started talking to him. And he was good enough to not only notice the curb for himself, but then pay attention to me. So your peripheral system turns on and off depending on how comfortable you are. So one of the things that optometry can do is measure how comfortable you are, make you real comfortable, and turn the periphery back on. But when the periphery is turned on too much, too fast, it's scary, because now all of a sudden there's a world out there and that you become aware of. So sometimes you have to go step by step by step. And that's what this was. This man had 6 different pairs of glasses in a sequence because one pair alone helped him. And then once he got helped, he was able to go the next step and the next step. Now, did you see how my head changed when the ringing started? Okay. I was looking to see if any of you would be changing here. I don't know if you can you hear the ringing? Okay. I set an alarm to see if head movement would happen. I was looking to see if any of you changed. Because the next point I want to make is that not only are your eyes and ears connected, your eyes and ears are connected to your neck and your head position. So if an unexpected sound comes out of the blue, your brain goes, what's that? Turns. There's a reflex between auditory and neck position and visual, because you turn in order to look at whatever you hear. If somebody in the room across the way dropped a big bunch of dishes and there was a crash, all of you would turn your heads to look through a wall, because that's where you hear the sound. So my point is that none of your systems are in isolation. They all work together. And it's real important to realize that there's visual parts of your eye, so the eye's sitting there, and it registers the outside information for eyesight, peripheral and central eyesight. But it also has paths from the eye right into comfort levels in the brain. So if I put something like this on, I'm going to pass this around. Here. There's 4 colors here. This is a green one and a red one. Here's a yellow and a blue. If you were told that you had to wear one of these all day long, would one feel more comfortable than the other, especially the yellow and the blue? So make a note of it, because I'm going to do a poll at the end, how many are more comfortable with yellow and how many are more comfortable with blue. Okay. But that's for internal comfort. It doesn't make you see any different, but it makes you feel different. So there's 3 different domains affected by optometry. There's your body, your mind, and the environment. So right now, what I gave you to push around, that's the how am I. That deals with the chemicals. How do I feel? Do I feel comfortable or not comfortable? I can see with all 4 of them, but which one feels better, yellow or blue? And then we're going to get into other survival functions of balance. I'm comfortable now because I'm nice and stable and balanced. But some people, they lean funny, they're wiggling, they don't know where they are in space. That's an important thing to make your body feel comfortable. If you're not comfortable, your mind gets confused. If your mind gets confused, you tune out or change the way you deal with the periphery. So it's important. So, does anybody have any questions so far? You do?
Do you find that many of the individuals with autism that you work with spend more time in overactive peripheral vision?
Yes. Her question is, do I find that many of the autistic individuals that I work with spend more time in overactive peripheral vision? And the answer is yes. I have a slide further down that shows that. So yes. But the peripheral vision isn't tested in a regular eye exam because they put the little holes in front of you and have you look this way. They do test the concept of, do you have peripheral eyesight? They say consciously, okay, I'm going to have you look here and I'm going to wiggle something. Tell me when you see it. But that's at a conscious level. I'm thinking, I'm looking here, I'm thinking, I'm concentrating. Oh yeah, there it is. And the doctor says, yes, you have peripheral eyesight. End of that test.
How does age impact this system?
Which system?
Your retina, your entire intake system.
How does age impact your processing system? Right?
Right.
Well, when you're brand new, if you're 4 months old, 5 months old, you haven't learned yet, because no babies are born with that central 20/20 piece. Babies are born without it, and it comes in later, like their teeth and their hair. So the development, so when you say how does age affect it, in little babies, they have to learn how. In utero, they spend about 6 months learning how to get their head position and their eye movement linked together. If the parents are bedridden, or not parents, but if the mother is bedridden during the gestation, they're losing some time in that experience. Then when they're born, they get another 6 months, roughly, of using their peripheral eyesight, just seeing blobs moving around. But then after about 6 months, they get that 20/20 piece, and then they use it, and then they learn to link the 20/20 piece with the peripheral piece. So if something during that development is a little off, they're not going to develop properly in that visual system. But as far as age, did you mean like 10 years versus 20 years versus...
For geriatric patients, then, what happens as you become 65, 70, 85 years old? Is there a
There's the correlate. It's like a bell curve. That at 40, you start, your eyesight is not as good up close. At 65, 70, your ears are not as good. Your balance is not as good. So you're losing. The 3 things that are connected are your eyes, your ears, and your balance, and your sense of balance. And if your eyes go and your ears go, your sense of balance also goes. So aging will change all of that.
And is that something that can be treated?
Yes. So if you're 65 and you're not good with balancing, that's another reason to work with an optometrist to get your eyes and ears connected well and to have different activities. But that's something that also an OT would jointly work with.
So a guy like Jeff could actually be
Well, he's not 65.
Take him back to when he was 25.
I don't know if he can go back to 25, but he can certainly go back to where things are more comfortable.
Interesting.
That being said, I am very cautious about walking in steps and tripping and falling. Is that a defense mechanism in response to perhaps one of these systems?
Yes, she's saying that she's more cautious than other people in walking, and she's scared of tripping and losing her balance. So that says that she's not confident in where she's stepping. So she asked if that is connected with this, and the answer is absolutely. So you should be, when we're ready to do demonstrations, you should be the first person up here for demonstrating to see how the systems link together. Because if you're confident, you just run. You don't have any issues. You had a question?
Kind of the same thing. I've had a number of eye surgeries, and even though they say everything is corrected and structurally everything is okay, I'm kind of like her. It's like I'm all over the place, and driving is a nightmare for me.
So she's saying she had a lot of eye surgeries, and driving is a nightmare, even though the doctors tell her she's fine. And yeah, that's because when they're telling you you're fine, they're covering up one eye and they're saying, yep, that eye's perfect, and here, yep, that eye's perfect, and now they'll use the two together and judge space and go drive. We didn't test you on moving targets, but you're going to be dealing with moving targets. But you're okay because we tested you on stationary targets. And we tested you when you were thinking about the target at a conscious level, but when you're driving, most of what you're doing is reacting at a subconscious level and preventing things and making decisions in space judgments and time judgments, which you don't have to do so much in a regular eye exam because they darken the room and they make it easy. There's nothing to look at but the letters that are lit up. Yeah. So the answer to your question is absolutely. So you could be demo number 2.